Hello everyone and welcome to another really awesome game from the FIDE Grand Swiss, chess.com's FIDE Grand Swiss that's currently being played in Riga, Latvia. It's the second round and it's Nihal Sarin versus Fabiano Caruana. A lot of you guys have requested this one and for good reason, so we're going to check it out. There are many games being played, of course we can't cover all of them, but I will try to cover as many as I can, and well, it's just very enjoyable, so let's check it out. So Sarin with the white pieces opens with d4. We have d5 by Fabi, c4, e6, knight to c3, and now the sharp Tarrasch defense with c5. We have e3, knight to f6, and now knight to f3, so this is all very standard. We have a6 by Fabi, and captures on d5. E captures and bishop to e2, so this is, again, all been played many times. Knight to c6 and Sarin castles. We have bishop to d6, and now we have a trade here, making black waste a tempo, so captures, and b3 now. Nihal prepares to fianchetto his light square bishop now to grab hold of this long diagonal. So castles, bishop to b2, and now bishop back to a7. You know the rook to c1 is coming, so the bishop is not very well placed on c5, and what you really want to do is play bishop a7, queen d6, bishop b8, and then put a lot of pressure on white's king side. So this is Fabi's plan, a very attacking formation. Rook to c1, and now rook to e8. And here, the most common move is knight to a4, with the direct threat of just bishop captures knight here, because if queen captures, then queen captures pawn on d5. That's kind of the idea here, and you could play something like this, queen d6, we're going to capture here, then black captures with the g pawn. Doesn't look all that impressive for black, but you know, some people enjoy it. Another thing, after knight to a4, you could play knight to e4, just get the knight out of harm's way, then white can go back, knight to c3, and then let's say bishop to e6, and the game just continues. This is of course possible, but Sarin goes for h3. It's a move that's been played only once, and a long time ago. It's was played like in 1977, and although it has been reached before, the move in that game was bishop to f5. But here Fabi goes for queen to d6, and it is now already, as of move 13, that we have a completely new game. Fabi is now preparing bishop to b8. He's going to put a lot of pressure on Sarin's king side, and if this knight ever leaves, the f3 square could be very dangerous. So here we have bishop to d3, and now comes bishop to d7. We have knight to e2, shifting the knight to help out with the defense on the king side, but also preparing knight to d4 to block this bishop and also to offer some trades. So rook a to d8, and now knight e to d4. So knight to e4 by Fabi. You don't want to trade here. Trading here doesn't really do anything for you. For example, captures, and now Sarin would just have a beautifully placed knight here on d4. You don't have a c pawn or an e pawn to kick it away from there. It would just be very enjoyable for white. So instead, after knight e to d4, we have knight to e4, saying that, all right, my knight is now excellently placed here, and if you capture it, then I just bring my rook into the attack, and all is well here. So here we have queen to e2, connecting the rooks, but now bishop to b8 as planned. And are there any dangers here? So a lot of pieces are attacking that king side. What can you play here? Well, rook f to d1 is one such move, because the knight might move, and you really want to have this f1 square available for your king, because now ideas like, for example, knight to g5 don't really work. Even though you now have access to the h2 square if knight is captured on f3, but we can just play knight captures on c6, b captures and king f1, and you don't really care. If knight captures, we're going to play queen captures, and queen h2 doesn't do anything for black. We can even grab a pawn, and if queen h1 check, we can just move, attack the queen. So this is perfectly fine for white. Or rather, it should be. So after rook f to d1, Fabi switches the queen over to the g file, queen g6. Now the threat is bishop captures on h3 as the g pawn is pinned, and now knight to h4. You could also consider maybe some king to f1, king to h1 moves. Sarin goes for knight to h4, and now we have knight captures on d4, saying, okay, if you capture my queen, I'm gonna capture your queen with check, and then after bishop captures, h captures, I'm gonna be up a knight. So of course, black would be completely winning here. So after knight captures on d4, we have bishop captures on d4, eliminating this knight, and now queen to h6, attacking the knight here. So knight goes back, and now very precise calculation by Fabi, bishop captures on h3. This is the move from the thumbnail. And what do you do here? Well, there's really nothing better than to just capture the bishop and then hope for the best. So g captures on h3, queen captures on h3, and now what do you play here? It's a really, really tough position to defend, and there's only one good move that saves white here, really. So I'm even gonna ask you to pause the video and try to find this idea, because it's not an easy one to make. So feel free while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding the only resource that allows you to continue playing this game. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is of course queen to f1. You have to attack black's queen and give up the knight on f3. It sounds odd, so congratulations to everyone who found this, but there's really no other move you can play here. I mean, it's just an ugly position. This knight can never move. Bishop to h2 just wins on the spot, and if you try to eliminate something like rook captures, then rook to g4 is coming, so you can't play that. There's really no good way to play this. So Sarin finds the only idea, which is queen to f1, and now Fabi just picks up the knight. Queen captures on f3. He has the attack. He now equalized in material, or rather the pieces, but he's now also up 2 pawns. So queen to g2, offering a queen trade, and it's not one you can decline easily because, checkmate is being threatened on g7. So Fabi trades here, captures, and now h6. So now we have this endgame where Fabi is up 2 pawns, but Sarin has the bishop pair. So maybe it's not all lost. So here we have b4. He wants to start advancing on the queen side, and now comes rook to e6, preparing some checks via rook to g6. So a4, and now what do you play here? Well, this is one position where you really have to figure out how to continue, because one slight inaccuracy and it's all over. And here you have to decide between something like rook to g6 check, f5, or moves like that, or maybe even prepare f5, rook to f8, then f5. But rook to g6 check is very interesting because it kind of trades down one of the rooks. For example, bishop to h2, we want to play rook to g1, and now after the move like rook to c2, we're gonna play rook to g1 check, king to e2, we can trade once here, captures, and now we go back, bishop to d6, and now maybe we start pushing here, so maybe that's one of the ways to play this. However, Fabi played h5 here, and this kind of allows Sarin to take advantage of the many weaknesses black has in the position. He starts with rook to c2. And Fabi now plays bishop to e5. So this is his plan. He wants to eliminate the bishop pair, or rather one of the bishops, but it also means giving up control of the c7 square. And Sarin very happily goes for this. Bishop captures, rook captures, and now rook to c7, just putting pressure on that b7 pawn. Knight to d6 defending, and now bishop back to e2. Now putting more pressure on the d5 pawn. Also, maybe bishop can come to f3 to attack the pawn further. So rook to g5 check, king to f1, and now rook to f5 with ideas of maybe knight coming to e4. So king back to g2, rook to g5 check, king to f1, and rook f5. So a repetition is being offered, but after rook to g2, Fabi just advances his pawn to b5. And here he says, all right, let's continue playing. But now it's much easier for Sarin to stabilize the position. A captures on b5. We have knight captures on b5. And now you have this problem of the pawn on a6 just being extremely weak. But also, after rook to c5, what do you play here now as black? Yes, you're still up material, but there's no easy way to make progress. If either of the rooks move off the defense of the d5 pawn, we're just going to capture it. If the knight moves, we're going to capture the a6 pawn. If the knight doesn't move, we're going to capture on b5 pawn captures and rook captures. We're going to win a pawn this way. So there really isn't a good way for Fabi to defend this. Rook to b8 was played, and now we have bishop to f1. Bishop to f1 is a nice little tricky improvement in the position, because if you just go pawn grabbing here, rook captures, we're going to play rook captures, and now knight to c3 might be a little bit annoying, attacking the rook and the bishop here, and you don't really have a good move here. You even have to give up the bishop with some like rook captures on h5. If you try and save the bishop, then just captures, and now black is winning. He's up 2 pawns. This is an easy win for black. So Sarin sees this. He sees that knight to c3 fork could be a problem. He just sidesteps with the bishop to f1, and now he's ready to capture the pawn. So rook g5 check by Fabi, king h2, now rook to g4. there's nothing better going after the pawn here, but now Sarin just captures on d5, but not with this rook, with this rook. We have rook captures on b4, and now even rook captures on h5. So you can see that that h5 push, well, got Fabi into more trouble than it really did anything for his position. So g6, we have rook h back to d5, and now king to g7, king to g3. Fabi still up a pawn, but how is this pawn ever going forward? I mean, you can't move the pawn because then you lose the knight. It's being attacked 3 times. If you move the knight, you lose the pawn. So really impossible. And even if you could somehow do it, again, if you successfully move the knight, you can never push the pawn. Both of the rooks control the a5 square, so that pawn is not moving an inch. So rook to b6 by Fabi, bishop to d3, we have rook to b2, and now we have f3. We have rook to b3, e4 now, rook to d6 now, going for this final trick in the position, and it's not all that obvious, but of course Sarin doesn't fall for it. The idea is if the rook is captured, then we're going to play knight captures on d6, and of course if you grab the pawn, then knight captures on e4 check wins for black, because the pawn is pinned and you're just going to blunder a rook. So of course this is Fabi's last attempt. Sarin of course sees this, he just captures on b5, removes the defender of the rook on d6, and now you can't go for this because of course just this, so we have to play rook captures on d3, and now rook captures on d3, rook captures on d3, and rook to b6, attacking the pawn here. So Fabi advances it, and now rook to a6. And now Sarin has a passed pawn behind he has a rook behind the passed pawn. We have rook to a3, defending it, but it's not really anything special. So here we have e5, a4, advancing the pawn, but now rook to a7. We have king to f8, king to g4, and now rook to e3. Going after this pawn, trying to trade this pawn for this pawn, but just king f4. We have rook to a3, king to g4, rook to e3, and now king to f4. Rook to a3, king to g4, and it was in this position on move 57 that Nihal and Fabiano agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. So really a crazy game. It took a very interesting turn very early on in the game. Already as of move 13 we had a completely new game. Then Fabi sacrificed for the attack, and Sarin really had to give up that bishop here after bishop captures. Like there was really nothing other than queen to f1. You have to give up the knight, and then he is up 2 pawns, but as you can see it's not that easy to convert to this, even for a former 2800 player like Fabiano Caruana. And I say former because in the previous video where I've shown Fabi's game, I told you guys that he was back on 2800. That's not really true. He is still at 2800 because, of course, ratings change once a month, but on the live ratings list, he's below 2800. I don't know why I thought that he'd be, again, 2800 after winning like 1 game here in this tournament. He's not far behind. Like maybe if he gets like 3 wins in a row, he could climb back. But for the moment, he is not, serves me right for trusting certain people on Twitter. But yeah, so sorry about that. I did not mean to deceive you on purpose. So yeah, really a wonderful game. Excellent defending by Sarin from that difficult position, and well, it really shows you just how promising of an elite player a young Nihal is. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Allison, and I would like to thank Micah Kennedy, Gustavo Fernandez, THCOlly.nl, and George Northworthy for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to cover some other games from this wonderful event, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and, well, whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.